Under the evening sky, where children's laughter once echoed and the air smelled of home-baked bread, silence now reigns. A woman returns to the house that used to be her entire universe, now a stranger's domain. The walls, once steeped in family warmth, greet her with the chill of emptiness. No footsteps, no voices, no trace of those she left behind. Only the echo of choices too late to apologize for. Years of freedom have turned into a cage, stripped of joy and meaning. Somewhere far away among pine trees and morning mist, a man is rebuilding his life, without blame, without expectations, with children whose smiles have become his anchor. He no longer searches for her in the crowd. He has erased the past from his present. But sometimes the past doesn't return to destroy. It comes to knock softly at the door, without shouting, without demands, only with the hope that someone might still listen. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If you're here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends or family. It really helps my channel a lot. Please tell me in which city or country you watch this video. I value every one of your comments. So, let's get started. Miles and Sienna had spent 2 decades side by side, 20 years bound by tenderness, routine, and the quiet decay of unspoken longings. Their journey began during a golden summer of youth, when their lives brimmed with possibility. Sienna burned with ambition and passion, a spark that instantly captivated Miles. He, in contrast, was calm, methodical, a man who found comfort in order rather than upheaval. Their differences once felt magnetic, a perfect counterbalance. Together, they built a life. They became parents to 2 children, Aria and Luca, and settled into a quiet neighborhood where the streets were lined with maples and familiar faces. As the years went by, Miles's love for Sienna only deepened, but something in her began to dim. The fire that once propelled her forward had cooled. Her days took on a dreamlike stillness, as if she were drifting underwater, muted, weightless, detached. The daily rituals, the school drop-offs, work commutes, household chores, had become motions she went through without belief or joy. What once anchored her identity had turned into invisible chains. The roles of wife and mother consumed her, leaving little room for the woman she used to be. While Sienna felt increasingly stifled, Miles clung to the life they'd made. He found solace in the predictable rhythm, family dinners, warm hugs, shared laughter, the slow unfolding of their children's lives. He remained blissfully unaware of the depth of her disquiet. To him, their life together was meaningful. He saw dignity in their shared effort and thought these years of dedication and compromise would one day feel like a triumph. But he failed to see how lost Sienna had become. The unraveling came to a head on the evening they were meant to celebrate their 20th anniversary. Miles, running late, had made several stops to put together something heartfelt. He finally walked through the door, holding a bouquet of red roses, a bottle of her favorite wine, and carefully chosen takeout from the place she used to love. But the air in the room was heavy the moment he stepped inside. Sienna sat at the dining table, illuminated by candlelight that cast sharp shadows across her tired face. She spoke, her voice breaking the silence like glass. "Do you even understand what today is?" 2 decades, and he still didn't see her. Her gaze drifted to the flowers and wine, her expression tinged with sorrow. "You think this fixes things?" she said, voice cold with weariness. Stunned, he faltered. "I thought this might make you happy." But she didn't waver. "It's not about flowers. I need to feel something real again. I can't keep waking up to a life that doesn't belong to me." Miles's chest tightened. He had never seen her so composed and yet so distant. "What are you saying?" he asked, barely audible. She inhaled shakily before speaking again. I need time. 6 months. No contact. I have to find out who I am without the labels, without this house, without being your wife or their mother. Just me. Her words landed like a sentence. Though they cut deep, he knew better than to object. The conviction in her eyes silenced any resistance. If that's what you need, I won't stand in your way, he replied, even as it shattered him. The next morning, she left with a suitcase in hand. As he watched her disappear down the walkway, something inside Miles crumbled. The days that followed were a blur. He threw himself into caring for Arya and Luca, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy while their family quietly fractured. But when night came and the house grew still, the emptiness was unbearable. In the aftermath, Miles poured his energy into fatherhood. He planned surprise outings, turned breakfasts into playful rituals, and tried to make evenings memorable for the kids. He wanted them to hold on to joy even amid the chaos. But no matter how loud the laughter, a hollow ache lingered, an absence that never faded. Meanwhile, Sienna embraced her freedom with an almost desperate hunger. She found a small apartment in the city, enrolled in art classes, reconnected with old friends, and explored parts of herself she had long neglected. She danced until dawn, stayed up talking with strangers, and chased fleeting moments of connection. There were short-lived romances, intense and distracting, but ultimately unfulfilling. Even in her newfound liberation, uncertainty clung to her like a shadow. Then one evening, Miles stumbled across a photograph online, Sienna, smiling, her arm around a man he didn't recognize. The caption read, "Here's to new beginnings." The image struck him like a knife. It wasn't just that she was with someone else. It was the ease in her smile, the way she seemed to be thriving without him. Grief curdled into bitterness. He began to question everything she had said. Maybe her need for space had been a cover. Maybe she had wanted out long before she admitted it. The thought consumed him, twisted the hurt into something sharper. He realized he could no longer wait for someone who had already left in every way that mattered. He had to protect himself and his children from further pain. That's when he made the call. Speaking with a lawyer felt like crossing a line he'd once vowed never to approach. But the truth had become undeniable. Clinging to hope was hurting more than the idea of letting go. When asked if he was certain, Miles's hands trembled as he signed the forms. "I have to do this," he said. "For me, for the kids." With the decision final, Miles began to lay the groundwork for a new life. He withdrew funds from their joint account, sorted through belongings, and began making quiet preparations for a future that no longer included Sienna. The process was clinical, methodical, worlds away from the warmth that once filled their home. A part of him recoiled from his own resolve, but the resentment had taken root too deeply to ignore. Miles and his children relocated to a secluded town, far removed from the noise and turmoil of their past. Their new home was modest and surrounded by towering trees, offering a sense of peace and anonymity. Though it lacked luxury, it represented a new beginning. Eager to start over, Miles threw himself into their new life. Weekends were spent constructing a treehouse with Luca, while Arya took to baking beside him in the kitchen. Gradually, their days took on a comforting rhythm, and a sense of home began to grow. The adjustment wasn't seamless, there were hurdles, but knowing he was shaping their future brought Miles a measure of peace. 6 months passed quietly. Then, without warning, Sienna returned to what used to be their family's house, hoping to find them there. But the rooms stood empty, silent. The warmth that had once filled the space had vanished without a trace. She walked from room to room, calling their names, her voice rising in panic. No one answered. Miles's number was disconnected. Online, there was no sign of them. It was as though they had vanished from the world. Desperation took hold. She turned to a private investigator, desperate for answers, but every possible lead crumbled. Miles had carefully removed every footprint they'd ever left behind. Now, alone in what had once been their shared life, Sienna finally faced the truth she had long denied. In pursuing her own freedom, she had let go of what truly mattered. Surrounded by the remnants of a life she had cast aside, she sank to the bedroom floor and broke down, overcome with guilt, solitude, and sorrow for the love and family she had forsaken. She tried to chase the excitement she'd once believed she needed, but each night brought only a deeper void. No one she met could fill the space left by what she'd lost. The bright lights of the city only magnified her loneliness. A heavy sadness settled over her. Days turned indistinguishable from nights, consumed by regret and restless sorrow. Meanwhile, in the countryside, Miles was slowly rediscovering who he was. Thoughts of Sienna still surfaced, but they no longer held power over him. He began to connect with his surroundings, volunteering at the local community center, getting to know neighbors. And he met Ella, a gentle barista from a nearby coffee shop, unlike anyone he'd known before. Ella moved through the world with quiet contentment, savoring life's small pleasures. Over time, she became a calming presence for Miles and his children. Though he wasn't ready for a romantic relationship, her company was welcome. They shared slow, deliberate moments, quiet talks, peaceful silences. Ella never pushed. She recognized his healing and gave him the space to grow. For the first time, Miles allowed himself to imagine a future that wasn't shadowed by the past. Arya and Luca adapted too. Their new school and the freedom of nature brought laughter back into their days. They occasionally asked about their mother, and Miles would reply gently, "She's finding her path, just like we are." He never spoke harshly of Sienna, only promised them he would always stay, that he was there for them, unlike how he once felt left behind. Back in the city, Sienna's remorse deepened. She thought of reaching out to Miles's parents, but couldn't bring herself to face their judgment. The thought of their disappointment was too much. Still, she often drove by their former home, hoping for a glimpse of her family, but it remained empty, a shell of what she had walked away from. Her hope turned into obsession. She retraced old connections, studied maps, searched tirelessly. But Miles had ensured there were no breadcrumbs to follow. He had cut all ties, protecting the life he was rebuilding. One cool autumn day, Sienna mustered the courage to visit Miles's parents. Their front porch was adorned with fall decorations. Pumpkins lined the steps, leaves swept neatly aside. The warmth of the scene clashed with the chill in her heart. When Miles's mother opened the door and saw her, her expression hardened. Sienna's voice trembled. "I just need to know they're okay. That's all I'm asking." Her eyes were filled with both grief and stern resolve. "He asked us not to tell you anything. He made his choice, Sienna, and so did you." Then she closed the door, leaving Sienna standing alone, numb with regret. As the years passed, Miles's life grew steady and full. There was no rush with Ella, no pressure to define what they were. She remained a grounding force, content with their quiet companionship. Though Miles still guarded his heart, she understood and stayed beside him as he healed. Their relationship deepened over time, built on patience and quiet understanding. Arya and Luca thrived, growing close to new friends and family in their small community. Though they still missed their mother, they adapted. Miles's journey forward wasn't about vengeance. It was about survival and protecting his peace. He had created a space where happiness could exist without Sienna's shadow looming. Sienna, meanwhile, was stuck in a cycle of grief. Eventually, she saw it clearly. The freedom she had sought had come at too high a cost. In leaving, she hadn't just lost her family, she had lost her own sense of self. She filled her days with empty tasks, but nothing could fill the void Miles and the children had left behind. Late one night, she sat down and wrote Miles a letter. She poured everything onto the page, her sorrow, her regrets, her longing. She didn't ask for redemption, only for the chance to be part of her children's lives, even from afar. With no other address, she mailed the letter to Miles's parents, praying they might deliver it. Weeks later, Miles found the envelope in his mailbox. He opened it and read every word slowly, letting the sadness rise and pass like a tide. But beneath the grief, something quieter lingered, an unexpected sense of closure. He knew there was no going back, no undoing what had already been done. Still, he felt a responsibility to respond, if only to let her know that Arya and Luca were safe, growing, and deeply loved. Through his parents, he passed along a brief note to Sienna. It acknowledged the finality of their past, but extended a cautious invitation. She might see the children again one day, on his terms. When Sienna read Miles's words, her heart was conflicted. It wasn't the reunion she had dreamed of, not even close, but it was something. A small opening, narrow and fragile, yet wide enough to step through. It offered her a chance, however limited, to be there for her children in whatever way he would allow. She clung to that glimmer of possibility with fierce determination, resolved to repair what had been broken, even if the road to redemption was long and uncertain. For Miles, allowing Sienna some form of contact with the children, though carefully measured, brought a muted sense of relief. Arya and Luca had started asking about their mother more often, and he couldn't let his bitterness deprive them of the right to understand her for themselves. They chose a neutral location for the first meeting, unfamiliar ground for everyone, chosen for its privacy and safety. It had been years since Sienna last saw the children, and when she did, the moment carried an overwhelming emotional charge, though it was tempered and held back. Her arms shook as she drew Arya and Luca close, holding them tightly as tears spilled and apologies poured from her lips in hushed repetition. Miles stood at a distance, silently observing, his face impassive. He recognized that this moment wasn't solely for Sienna. It belonged to the children, too. They spoke about their routines, their lives, their little stories, and Sienna absorbed every word, desperate to catch up on all she had missed. From that fragile beginning, a delicate arrangement took shape. She could visit them quietly now and then, while the boundary between her and Miles remained firmly in place. Those brief encounters, spaced out over time, slowly began to knit together the torn threads between her and the children. It wasn't the future she had once imagined, but it was something real, an initial step toward restoration. Years slipped by. One calm evening, Miles sat on the porch beside Ella, watching the soft twilight settle over their garden as Arya and Luca laughed and played nearby. He reached for her hand, feeling the depth of all they had endured and the quiet gratitude for the life they had built together. A rare peace settled in his heart, one he once thought out of reach. Back in the city, Sienna created a new rhythm for herself, maintaining a steady, if subdued, role in her children's world. Her life no longer revolved around old hopes, but was shaped by lessons learned and a quiet resilience. The ache of guilt never completely left her, but in the time she spent with Arya and Luca, she found moments of stillness and purpose. Miles and Sienna never returned to what they once were. Their lives never overlapped again in ways that resembled closeness, yet an unspoken understanding lingered between them. The wounds they carried, born of choices made long ago, never fully faded, but neither did the memory of a love that had once been fierce and bright, and the children who had risen, marked but strong from its ashes. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you. She thought she had everything under control. He believed there was still something left to save. But one Friday night didn't end the way it used to, and everything began to unravel. The subtle cracks, the fleeting glances, the words left unsaid, they weren't just coincidences. Sometimes things don't need to be shouted to fall apart. Silence is enough. One gesture, one sentence, one late night, and you're no longer the same person. Everything that once felt solid suddenly turns fragile. And when the truth finally surfaces, only one question remains. What do you do when everything is lost, but the pain is still alive? During that period of my life, I was already married. Both of us were in our mid-20s, finding our way through the typical highs and lows of early adulthood. Ours was an ordinary relationship. After a few years of dating, we decided to get married, settling into a rhythm and working together toward the life we wanted to create. I had reliable employment during the day, and my wife, let's refer to her as Sabrina, took on different side jobs whenever she had the chance. Despite our busy schedules, we always made an effort to spend time together. Or at least, that's what I thought. Sabrina had always enjoyed being active online, but what started as casual browsing gradually became something she was fully absorbed in. Her phone was constantly in hand. She'd send me funny videos, interesting articles, and memes all the time. At first I thought it was sweet. These digital tokens of affection brightened my routine. Over time, though, the nature of her messages shifted. Instead of light-hearted memes, she began forwarding lengthy pieces and podcasts, many of them focused on relationships, especially the idea of open marriages. I remember the first time she seriously brought it up. She sent me a podcast episode and followed it up with a long message. She suggested that, since we were still young and hadn't really experienced much of the world, maybe we should consider exploring this path. At first, I brushed it off, thinking she was either joking or just curious. After all, we were married. Wasn't that supposed to mean commitment, working through life together? But Sabrina wasn't willing to let the conversation drop. The topic started to come up again and again over the next several months. Anytime I tried to move us past it, she'd double down, arguing that we were too young to be locked into one way of living, and that we should experiment before getting too settled, or before thinking about having children. Eventually, the constant back and forth wore me down. I wasn't excited about the idea, but after so many arguments, I found myself too tired to keep resisting. Once we agreed to have a serious discussion, we set specific rules. If we were going to open our marriage, there needed to be strict boundaries. Always use protection, never bring anyone to our home, no overnight stays after being intimate, and a full month of waiting, plus getting tested, before we could be together again if something did happen. The conversation felt almost unreal, but at the time, it seemed like the only way to maintain a sense of safety and control. Before long, we crossed a line I'd never imagined we would. Our once standard marriage shifted to something entirely different, and it happened almost overnight. Sabrina quickly embraced the changes. Within a week or two of finalizing our rules, she started setting up dates. Friday nights, when I usually worked late, became her time to go out. She'd get dressed up, go out for meals or drinks, and usually get home around the same time as me. The new routine felt strange, not exactly in the way I had feared, but still unsettling. After her outings, she'd sit down with me and share details about her evenings, what she did, who she met, what they discussed. In the early days, her stories were light, just dinners and conversations, nothing physical. Sometimes she came home almost bouncing with excitement, acting even more affectionate than usual, as if her night out made her miss me more. It was an odd feeling. I didn't know how to process it, but I stuck with the agreement. I tried going out on dates myself, too. I managed to go on 3. Each time things would start well, but as soon as I revealed I was married, albeit in an open relationship, the mood would shift. Every time, the women decided they didn't want to pursue anything with a married man, no matter the arrangement. After the 3rd time, I decided to stop trying. It just didn't suit me. Meanwhile, Sabrina seemed energized by the whole experience. Every week she'd head out and come back with fresh stories. Strangely enough, at first, the change actually brought us closer. I didn't love the situation, but it didn't hurt as much as I had anticipated. Maybe I was trying to convince myself it was all right, since we both stuck to the boundaries and, at least during that first year, nothing physical had happened. That's probably why I didn't put up a fight. As long as the rules were followed, I tried to accept the situation, but after a year had passed, small changes began to creep in. Looking back, I realize now that the warning signs were there. Sabrina's nights out became less casual. She'd come home even later than before, and she seemed less eager to talk about her experiences. I sensed something was different, but couldn't quite figure out what had changed. Then, one Friday, she didn't get home until nearly 3 in the morning. I was already in bed when she finally walked in, laughing about how tired she was and joking about feeling sore. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then I noticed bruises on her chest and thighs. I lay there quietly, staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the thoughts that crowded my mind. A few days later, when she tried to initiate intimacy, I remembered our agreement: no contact for 30 days after being with someone else. I reminded her, but she acted like I was overreacting. Still, I held my ground. Those rules had been set for a reason, and I couldn't just act like nothing had changed. That was the moment when things really started to feel different between us. Each Friday night, she'd disappear with that same man, and as soon as the weekend faded, she'd start urging me to scrap the 30-day boundary we'd put in place. It felt as though I was nothing but a fallback, someone she only turned to when her first choice was unavailable. I wasn't blind to it, but I truly didn't know what to do, so I threw myself into my work. I stayed late at the office for no real reason, or wandered the streets, or logged extra hours at the gym, anything to delay the moment I had to walk through our front door, because it didn't feel like mine anymore. She was clearly caught up in the rush of her new relationship, completely absorbed in the excitement. While she chased after whatever new thrill she found, I was gradually drifting away. I exercised more, lost weight, but she never even noticed. Her mind was somewhere else every Friday, and I was left alone to deal with the pieces of myself she left behind. Everything shifted on the night of our 4th anniversary. I remember that day perfectly. I'd taken a day off work, cleaned up our place, and cooked dinner, hoping to spark some memory of how we'd started. She came home around 4 in the afternoon, and for a moment, I wondered if she remembered the significance of the day. I thought maybe she'd realize when she saw what I'd done. But she acted like nothing was different. She didn't mention a thing, walked straight past me to take a shower, got dressed, and then announced she was heading out to hear a band play at some bar. I just stood there, speechless. She had forgotten our anniversary. When I finally said something about it, she barely reacted, shrugged, told me not to wait up, and left. It was like being punched in the gut, but I stayed silent. What could I possibly say? I watched her leave as if it were any other night. I stayed up just waiting, watching the hours drag on, midnight, then 1, then 2. She still hadn't returned by 3 in the morning, so I finally sent her a message. "You broke our agreement. You didn't come home." She never answered. That was when reality hit me. She had chosen to cross the line we'd set, and it was no accident. She finally walked in, looking exhausted, close to noon the next day. I didn't want her explanations, but she started offering them anyway. She claimed she'd just closed her eyes for a second and accidentally slept through the night. I couldn't pretend to believe her, and I said as much. She started apologizing, insisting it wouldn't happen again, but I wasn't ready to talk. I was too upset, too angry. That Monday, she came to my job unexpectedly, making a scene in front of my coworkers and even my boss, crying, begging for forgiveness, pleading with me not to give up. I had to calm her down and get her out before she made things worse. I told her we could talk on Sunday, just to get her to leave. The following Saturday, after work, she tried to be affectionate again. I reminded her of the 30-day rule. That was when she finally admitted what she'd been holding back. She told me she was ready to end things with the other guy and wanted to save our marriage. She said she woke up that morning, saw my message, and realized how foolish she'd been. Apparently, he hadn't treated her well, and she'd seen his true colors. But by that point, I was past caring. She felt like a stranger to me, and the idea of being close again just felt wrong. The rules no longer mattered. I simply didn't want her anymore. After that, everything continued to unravel. Even though she insisted things were over with him, I couldn't bridge the gap that had grown between us. She tried to act like nothing had changed, but everything was different. Each day she tried to reconnect, cooking, sitting beside me, reaching for my hand, but I couldn't respond in kind. My feelings had faded. Living with her was like sharing space with a roommate instead of a partner. The last straw came a few weeks later. One evening, after a doctor's appointment, she sat down with me and announced she was pregnant. She looked genuinely excited, talking about a fresh start for us, but I couldn't match her enthusiasm. I just looked at her and said, "I hope you and he are happy together." She stared at me, shocked, as if it hadn't even crossed her mind that the child might not be mine. Days later, she finally told the other guy. His response? Just a dismissive, "Tough luck." He even suggested she pretend the baby was mine. That was it for me. I couldn't keep pretending, so I filed for divorce soon after. After that, it was as if something snapped inside her. She started making desperate promises, offering anything she could think of to fix things, swearing that she'd cut him off, that she'd do whatever it took to make things right. But I was done. I listened to her, but emotionally, I'd already left. I wasn't angry anymore, just finished. We had to keep living together for a while because our lease still had time left, but every day played out the same way. She'd try to get close, I'd keep my distance, she'd get upset, and I'd find some excuse to leave, go for a run, or just stay out of the apartment. And as her pregnancy became more visible, my resentment only deepened. She walked around the place trying to keep up appearances while I counted down the days until I could finally move on. 3 weeks ago, she came into my room one evening with pizza, hoping to share a normal meal, and brought up the baby again. She talked about her hopes, about the possibility of us being a family, and then reached for me. That's when I snapped. I told her flatly, "I'm not interested in pregnant women. You might want to try your luck on Tinder. I'm sure you'll find someone there willing to go along with your plans." She left the room in tears, but by then, her anguish didn't move me. From that night forward, everything started moving much faster. Soon after, we had our first divorce hearing. The judge mandated that we attend 6 weeks of mandatory marriage counseling before any decisions would be made final. The idea didn't appeal to me, but I decided to comply just to get things over with. Therapy felt awkward. The sessions were individual, and the whole process seemed more like a bureaucratic requirement than a genuine attempt to repair our marriage. The last straw came on my birthday. The previous week, Sabrina had suggested we celebrate the day together, but I declined. I didn't want to commemorate special occasions with her anymore, especially after our 4th anniversary, when she went out and became pregnant by a complete stranger. She kept insisting, and eventually I snapped. I told her directly that I wasn't interested in sharing those experiences with her anymore. She broke down sobbing, but I simply walked out and went to work. Before I knew it, Monday had rolled around. We were due for another counseling appointment, but she never showed. I tried calling her repeatedly. She didn't answer. I even got in touch with her friends, but still no word. In the end, I called her parents, and that's when I found out what had happened. On Sunday morning, the police had arrested her for driving under the influence. She wasn't just drunk, she was putting other people at risk. Her parents were already on their way to help her and asked if they could stay at our place for a bit. I agreed, telling them I'd stay with a friend while they handled things. At the same time, I called my lawyer and asked to speed up the divorce process. The whole thing didn't feel real. The woman I'd married, the same person who had begged me to save our relationship just a few weeks before, was now sitting in jail because of a reckless mistake. At that point, I knew reconciliation was impossible. The divorce was finalized last Friday. The next day, I went to pack up her things and help her parents load the moving van they'd rented. She was still in jail, but they told me she'd be released the next morning. I had no plans to see her. Meeting face to face seemed pointless and would only make things harder for both of us. After dragging it out for so long, a clean break was clearly the healthiest option. And so, that's how it ended. I helped her parents finish with her belongings, said goodbye, and closed that chapter for good. After all the turmoil, arguments, dishonesty, and desperate pleas, it was finally over. And to be honest, I felt nothing but ready to move on and begin again. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.